Good morning, and we are continuing with the second plenary session today, directly linked to the John Vincent Atanasoff Symposium on Modern Computing. This plenary session is going to be actually a panel discussion, and the topic of the panel discussion is the invention of electronic digital computing. So we've got 6 panel members here on stage and another 4 connecting online from different parts of the world. Using underline, this is not a problem. So I'm just going to tell you who is sitting on the panel, although you probably know some of them. John Atanasov II is going to be connecting online. Gordon Bell is also going to be online. So here is John already on the screen, and Gordon Bell as well. Kiril Boyanov, I understand, is online from Sofia, Bulgaria. Charles Cole is here next to me. Carl Chang is also here. You know Carl, he was chairing the previous plenary session. Tom Conti is in the middle of the stage, past president of the Computer Society, similar to Carl Chang and also similar to Dejan Milojicic. At the end of the panel. John Gustafson is somebody that you already know very well from the previous keynote. And Hironori Kasahara is going to join from Tokyo, Japan. Hironori is also a past president of the Computer Society. So this is the panel. What we're going to talk about, we're going to discuss the invention of electronic digital computing. That's what we are going to focus on. So the outline is, I'm going to mention another book which may not be as good as the one that John mentioned earlier, but this is the book that answers the question, how the computer on my desk got to me. Then a brief introduction, brief background about the information revolutions in human history, stopping on the 4th information revolution, the invention of electronic digital computing, some other early electronic digital computers during the World War II, the acceptance of John Atanasoff's invention, and some ideas or perhaps speculation or discussions about the 5th and maybe the 6th information revolution. So how the computer on my desk got to me, that's a book written by Jane Smiley, who is not an engineer. Jane Smiley is a novelist. But she was very curious to find out how the computer on her desk got to her. And after talking to John Gustafson, she started writing a book, and she wrote a book which was published in 2010. And the cover of the book is on the screen. And basically, amongst many characters who were all brilliant engineers and scientists, the inventor was actually the 34-year-old professor of physics, John Vincent Atanasoff. So going back in human history very briefly, just to make sure we understand why we're talking about the 4th information revolution. So the first one was the advent of speech. So humans started talking to each other. And that was approximately 50,000 years ago. So that's the first information revolution. The second one was the writing, which was approximately 5,000 years ago. And I've got two examples here of two very popular handwritten books. One is a page from Leonardo da Vinci. It's handwritten works, and the other one is a page from a Bulgarian medieval book kept in the British Library. The problems with handwriting was, of course, that most of the books were unique. And having unique copies of the books made them very difficult to access. And also, events like the big fire in the Library of Alexandria basically destroyed a lot of human knowledge at that time. So the advent of paper in China enabled a new medium. And the third information revolution started with the printing press designed and built by Gutenberg. And that was the beginning of the dissemination of information. So the information was no longer property of a single person who owns a book or is in the library. It can be printed in many copies. And of course, dissemination was also by technologies like radio, telephone, television, telegraph, all those more recent technologies were about dissemination of information. However, information processing was until then privilege of the human beings only. We were the only ones able to process information. So the automatic processing in discovery of new information has been a very interesting challenge for centuries, obviously. And there are interesting questions that we can answer much easier nowadays, but that were very difficult questions 100 years ago. What is a computer? In the Second World War, a computer was a job title. So what do you work for? What do you do for a living? I'm a computer, right? Solving ballistic equations for the US Army. Now the medium, mechanical, electrical, relays, electronic, analog or digital, these are all very important questions, design decisions. John Gustafson already mentioned actually very well some of, or most of them. So the early ideas were first introduced by Charles Babbage. So Charles Babbage was the one to work on the two possible engines. They were never operational. A bit later, in the middle of the 19th century, two Swedish brothers actually managed to build an operational machine. And there is one, as far as we know, operational in the Computer History Museum in Mountain View, California now. But these were mechanical machines using mechanical technologies. Analog computers, Vannevar Bush started very successfully the design and development of analog computers in MIT, based on earlier work by Lord Kelvin. If we watch the video of John Atanasoff's lecture in Marlborough, he says, I looked at Vannevar Bush's work and I studied it, and it wasn't the right thing to do. So John Atanasoff knew about this quite well. Electromagnetic relays Konrad Zuse was a very successful inventor, engineer, designer of on electromagnetic relays, starting at the end of the 30s in 38 and going all the way to the 50s. The same was true for Howard Eichen, who built the Harvard Mark I computer on electromagnetic relays, which was supported by IBM in 1943. Now, the electronic digital computer was actually, as we already heard, I mean, most of us, I guess, know, was invented initially in 37, with first prototype working in 39 at Iowa State College by John Vincent Atanasov. So I'm going then to not perhaps, but to ask the panel members to comment about the core principles of electronic digital computing. John Gustafson quite rightly mentioned that it is much more than 4, but the 4 are the core ones. And if you look at more deeper in the technical details of the invention, you will find more than 10. But let's concentrate on those 4. So I hope Hironori Kasahara could speak about the first one.
So, thank you very much, Rajmir. May I speak?
Yes, please. Yes, Hironori.
Okay. Thank you very much. I am Hironori Kasahara, IEEE Computer Society President, 2018. Obviously, electronics have been thousands to million times faster than mechanical and electromechanical technologies. The ABC machine was the first electronic data computer using vacuum tubes. However, we sometimes couldn't realize the ongoing innovative ideas of that era. For example, when I was a student, the textbooks said the first electronic data computer was ENIAC. But now we know the ABC machine was the first. The same kind of things happen often. For example, the stored memory architecture has been called von Neumann architecture. Nevertheless, Dr. Neumann joined the ENIAC project after the ENIAC team proposed EDVAC project for binary electronic data computer based on stored memory concept. So I think we shouldn't hesitate to recognize the previously made innovative ideas and efforts when we know. This kind of recognition is very important for sustainable technological progress. I think we should create the John Atanasov Medal or award to show our respect for their ideas and efforts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hironori. So yes, most of the technologies, electronic technologies nowadays are actually computerized. We call them digital. We call them usually digital. They're computerized. They're computerized because they're based on the electronic digital computing principles invented by John Atanasov. So here we are, digital television, telephone exchanges, and so on and so forth. So the next topic is the use of the binary number system instead of decimal. And that was touched upon quite nicely by John Gustafson, and I would like to ask John to elaborate further, please.
So am I on? Yes. Atanasoff had a budget of about $5,000 for the full-scale machine, which was, of course, dwarfed by the amount of money that was available for the ENIAC. The ENIAC used 18,000 vacuum tubes in order to do things in decimal. The Atanasoff machine used 300. That's the savings you get from using binary. Even at the level of just storing a digit and using counting methods to go from 0 to 9 and flip over to 0 again, as opposed to using bits, it takes about 7 times as many gates to use base 10 as it does to use base 2. There's a very strong tendency in early technology to anthropomorphize everything. They wanted it to look like a grade school arithmetic machine. Just like when they designed floating point, they make it look like scientific notation, even though that's not the best way to store numbers on a computer by any means. So I was thinking about the Jetsons of 1960s. Remember Rosie the robot? That's what they thought a vacuum would look like, a robot pushing a vacuum around. I've got a couple of Roombas in my house. They don't look anything like Rosie the robot. So we do eventually find out that what's best for machines is not what's best for human beings. And one big one was use base 2.
Thank you, John. The next topic is the use of dynamic low-cost memory, and that's something that Tom Conti would elaborate about.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And this is important, that today when we think of memory, we take it for granted. But back then, there was a debate on how to do memory or data retention, as it was called. And at the time, there were several different approaches to this. One would be persistent memory. And if you look at, for example, magnetic core memory, this was actually woven by hand. They never quite figured out how to get a machine to do it. If you look at static memory, which is a misnomer since it is constantly consuming power, the advantage of static memory is that it's always there as long as it has power. The disadvantage of it is it's large and costly. Today, even the simplest static memory cells are 6 transistors versus 2 transistors for dynamic memory. Of course, the problem with dynamic memory, the genius is to use capacitance. The problem with capacitance is it's impossible to have perfect capacitance. There's always parasitic resistance. So what do you do with that? What you do with that is you periodically refresh, and that's what John Atanasoff discovered. And the revolution in designing memory that way ended up with low cost, plentiful memory. And the vast majority of memory for calculation, not for storage, but for calculation today, is based on dynamic memory.
May I add something?
Yes, of course.
Who first coined the word memory as opposed to storage? Who called it memory? John Vincent Atanasoff. He coined the word memory in the very first newspaper article in the Des Moines Register, where the headline was "Machine Remembers," because now they had an actual electronic machine that could remember data.
That's true. Prior to that, it was called data retention
Or storage.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. The next topic that comes up is the fact that machine was following Boolean logic rather than analog principles for computation. So I hope Dejan would speak about this. Please, Dejan, go ahead.
Thank you, Vladimir. Both my father and mother were historians, but I'm a lousy historian. I'm looking more into the future. But I will start by basing on my first experience with analog versus digital. Back in '82, I was tasked to do the digital part of the hybrid computer. That hybrid computer did analog calculations, very specific and targeted, and then I just did testing with Boolean and some control. That was the first time when I was exposed. 40 years later, or approximately at Hewlett Packard Labs, we've been working on using memristors, which effectively did analog computation and then converting to digital back and forth. So these are my 2 exposures to analog versus digital. Without any doubt, what Professor Atanasov did was outstanding. I mean, if you think about using analog, as I think John Gustafson was correctly pointing out, you need to tune these things. So user interfaces for one specific use for doing calculation, integration, whatever is ideal. It could be very effective, intuitive, etc. But as soon as you move a little bit away from it, you are running into large problems. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. If you then think about scaling, that's a huge problem for analog. You've seen most recent Frontier computer, it just happened to be my company. They were able to scale it to hundreds of racks. And by separation of and abstracting away these racks and building from digital circuits all the way up, you can achieve much more. With analog would be very, very hard. Third thing is in terms of efficiency. If you think how you will take these analog computers, how efficiently they can compute, how much power dissipation, as Professor Conte was saying, it's much easier. And Jeffrey Fox mentioned over the breakfast earlier that even today's computers only use a fraction for large high-performance computing. With analog, it would have been even much worse. And then the last thing is the broadened use. And that's what is really important. Digital computers are now used everywhere. Analog, really hard to deploy and use everywhere. So over and over, I mean, no one can overestimate the contributions that Professor Atanasov has accomplished. Thank you.
Thank you, Dejan. So basically what Jane Smiley was doing, tracking backwards through history and through events, she an inventor, a physics professor at Iowa State, and that was John Vincent Atanasov. Because of a number of reasons, some of the technical reasons were very well actually explained by John Gustafson in an addendum to this book, right? Okay. So that's the photo that John was perhaps not exactly that, but one of the photos taken back in 39 by one of the graduate students working with JVA. Now, what was happening after the successful demonstration of the first prototype, which in fact earned JVA a small grant to pay his graduate students for their work. And I would like to ask JVA second, who is online, to tell us about the events in June 1941 when John Mockley visited Ames and stayed with the Atanasovs for several days.
Okay, thank you. I think it's interesting during the period, the evolution of the ABC. Been so many events that have occurred, and of course, this was one of the key relative to the court case, perhaps. My dad had invited Mockley at a conference in 1940, and he appeared in 1941 in June with his son, Jimmy, who was 6, and it turned out I was 6 at the time. So I remember very clearly that some young guy appeared. My mother was surprised because they weren't anticipated, either his son or himself. We played, and we also visited the physics department where we watched the machine in operation along with his dad. I recall my father was very pleased that John Mockley had come, and he was very anxious to show people the work they had accomplished. My mother was somewhat reticent and objected to all the information that he was providing, as she thought he was giving away the store. And we did see he gave him the 35-page document, and let him read it. And he did. He stayed in the upstairs of our house, and the lights were on late, and I'm sure he did a lot of copying and everything that was mentioned before. And certainly, even though my father had said this is proprietary information, he apparently did not treat it as such. And after the trip, he sent numerous letters thanking him for the information. But then in the conference much later, he said all he got from that trip was a bloody nose. So he was very sorry about that. But that was the event that occurred during that time.
John, do you see that the text on the slide, which is text from your father's letter to Mockley, telling him about the conditions for discussing his invention with John Mockley?
Yes, well, as I thought I mentioned, he was very open about it, but he didn't give him any copies of the information, and certainly didn't want that disclosed, and he expected that the Iowa State would file the patent shortly thereafter, certainly in 1942, and of course that didn't happen, even though he had negotiated carefully with Iowa State, and he also had met with the patent attorney, which he was located, Trexler was located in Chicago, and they'd done a great deal of work. And in 1940, when he was in New York, Philadelphia, and Washington, he and Clifford Berry went to the patent office and researched a lot relative to any claims that might exist. And he thought there was really an open road for a patent at that time. And we think we might have been a very different family if the patent had been perfected, and he would have gotten royalties from that. But that was, he did quite all right otherwise, and he felt ultimately fairly good about the whole situation.
So what I remember from talking to you recently, your family with your dad drove to New York City first, and then from there you drove down to Washington, D.C. to meet Clifford Berry and make inquiries in the patents office, right?
Yes, we rode in a 1940 Ford V8, the South Wind heater, and it was quite a trip. I didn't really appreciate it, but we landed in New York City just before Christmas. We were in a hotel there with my two sisters. There was 5 of us. I got lost in Macy's and sitting on the counter, and they paged me, and I remember that very clearly. But the rest was history. My dad met with the Research Corporation. He was trying to raise $5,330 for the development unit, which sounds like a trivial amount, but certainly amounted to 10 or 20 times that today. And he ultimately received that 2 or 3 months later. In Philadelphia, he first met John Mockley, who was giving a paper there on weather, and he introduced himself and invited John to come out. And he was very pleased when he did come out, although he felt John didn't have much background in electronics or electrical circuitry, and he certainly didn't have anything going very much relative to computers when he visited in June of 1941.
Thank you, John. Thank you. That's very interesting. That's details of the family history of the Atanasovs. So if we go to the early electronic digital computers, we should definitely mention an electronic digital computer that has been top classified in the United Kingdom for nearly 60 years. And this is the Colossus Machine. So the Colossus Machine was an electronic digital computer. It was first operational in December 43. It was so successful, it was actually on Christmas Eve, the prototype didn't work. On Christmas Day, it was actually working. So it was delivered to Station X in Bletchley Park for cracking the German Lorenz cipher codes. And it was so successful that the team built 10 of those between 44 and 45. The key inventors here are Bill Tutt. Bill Tutt was a young mathematician who actually cracked the encryption. And Tommy Flowers, who built the machine. Tommy Flowers had similar challenges to those that John Gustafson described about Atanasov, related to the reliability of the electronic tubes or valves. He had to convince a number of knowledgeable engineers that valves is still a good choice and it is going to work in a specific mode. And the machine was built in the post office labs in Dollis Hill, Northwest London, and then delivered to Station X. So that's what is interesting about the Colossus, because it was top classified, there was almost no follow-ups. The first documents about the Colossus machine were basically made available about 10, 15 years ago. So even humans, both Bill Tutt and Tommy Flowers, passed away within the time of their contracts. So they didn't speak, they just 60 years, that's it. Just something important and interesting. There was huge success and there was no follow-up. Mike Williams remember telling me, but Vladimir, there were humans that worked and they were probably then involved in early computers industry. That's most likely the case. Of course, ENIAC is a machine that John Gustafson covered quite well. What's interesting here that we can mention again is that it was another military project. It was operational in December 45. The team was, again, something like more than 6, maybe 10 people, including very well-known names like Arthur Burks and his wife and several others. But Packard and Mockley got a permission to publish the results. They called a press conference in February 46. ENIAC was now publicly available, revealed to the media, and then they created a company without publishing a paper. This is when John von Neumann wrote his first draft and sent it to Goldstein saying, please work on this and publish it, because it has to be publicly available. So the stored program principles were, of course, accredited to von Neumann. And the summer school in 46 was extremely important because at this summer school, a number of British researchers and scientists were invited, close allies after the war. And basically the first stored program computer was the Manchester Baby. So the Manchester Baby was operational in June 48. Only, as far as I know, only 256 memory cells for programming and maybe programming add data. But the Manchester colleagues are very proud of this, and the full reconstruction of the Manchester Baby is the Science Museum in Manchester. It used to be in the department before. Now recognition of John Atanasoff's invention. John, JVA second, would you like to say something about IBM's interest in the 50s?
Yes,
Just
thank
briefly.
you. My dad's history with IBM was sort of interesting. One, he immediately became interested in their tabulator, which was in our statistics department at Iowa State College. And they were very upset that he would try to use that as a part of his invention. So they really told him to stay away, and he wasn't allowed to interface with it at all. He felt that his work would be a very good fit with IBM, and he made various overtures to IBM, and he generally got a reaction. There'd never be such a thing as an electronic digital computer. That was attributed maybe even to Watson Sr. So that went along for a very long time. And then, interestingly enough, in 1964, I guess it was, their patent attorney came to visit him in Rockville, Maryland. We had a company named Ordnance Engineering at the time, and I was happened to be working summers there. I was 18 and in college, and they had established a cross-licensing arrangement with Sperry Rand, and they were very concerned that my dad might have preceded some of that, and they were concerned about the implications in a court case. They spent 3 or 4 hours there, and after the meeting, my dad was very careful relative to discussing any of the details of his invention with the IBM at that time. And he told me on the way home, he said, I think I'm going to be famous one of these days. And I told him, I doubt it. He proved to be correct 10 years later, which I was very pleased to have it happen. But it was very interesting because it was a very checkered history with IBM. He made so many overtures, they had no interest, and then they're very concerned when they jumped in at the last minute.
Thank you, John. Thank you. That's still very interesting. I'm not sure this has been published yet. So the next thing that we should mention definitely is a textbook that Richard K. Richards published in '66. And Richard K. Richards was a graduate from Iowa State, and he knew Clifford Berry. And and this book became very, very important in the recognition of JVA's invention, because this book arrived as a single copy in the National Library in Sofia, Bulgaria. So I would like to ask Kiril, who is on the line, to tell us how they back in the middle of the 60s read in Richard K. Richard's book about John Vincent Atanasov.
Hello, everybody. It is very nice to talk about the John Atanasov invention. In end of the 60s, Georgy Alipiev, I, Kiril Boyanov, and Blagovest Sendov work on a book, microprogram control. We examine the literature and examine especially this book of Richard K. Richard's Electronic Digital Systems, and noticed that the name of John Atanasov is spelling with 2F. This is a typical ending of name of Russian and Bulgarian origin. We talk with Blagovest Sendov, who at that time was Dean of Faculty of Mathematics in Sofia University. He sent a letter to Dr. Park, at that time president of Iowa State University. At that time, I think that Iowa was a college. In the reply of university, he received the address of John Atanasov, sent a letter directly to him. On the 2nd of October 1970, John Atanasov replied with a very long letter describing this romantic story with his car. I think that John mentioned for this idea. After that, in 19th of October, Bulgarian Academy of Science, with the help of the academician Lyubomir Iliev and the president of Academy Angel Balevsky, sent an invitation to John Atanasov. In an invitation, Academy want to see all family of John in Sofia. In November, the family of John Atanasov, practically everybody, maybe John remember this, arrived in Sofia. Bulgarian Academy of Science suggests to National Assembly to award John Atanasov with highest order for science in Bulgaria, Saint Cyril and Methodius. He received this order, and in the end of the year, he is going back. I want, if you permit, to mention more several interesting things. We continue to support the recognition of John Atanasov, and meanwhile, you know that he was suggested for Nobel Prize. Also, he was suggested for the prize, very prestigious prize of Marconi. Our president at that time, Todor Zhivkov, sent a letter of support to the Council for the International Marconi Prize. The other event is connected to its occasion of 80th birth of John Atanasov, and according to this date, in Iowa State University was organized a big celebration, but in the same time, Bulgarian Academy of Sciences elected John as foreign member of Academy. John visited Bulgaria for the second time in 1985. And he has a report, a speech in the Varna connected with children's age. Interesting event was held in October 2003. Then we celebrate in National Theatre of Sofia the 100 years from the birth of John. The family presented, and it was a very, very emotional celebration with many addresses, including this from Bill Gates. In the October, in Iowa State University, Chang organized also a very big celebration dedicated to recognition of John Atanasov invention. And I want to finish with two important events. One of them is that in 2003, a monument is inaugurated in Sofia. Vladimir, I sent a picture of this monument. It will be interesting if you put in the screen. And in this year, the president, Georgy Parvanov, established the award for the young scientists up to 35 years, which are working in computer science. Till now, 20 young scientists receive these awards. Very interesting, and maybe last event which I want to mention is a celebration in 2006 in Bulgarian National History Museum. It was under IEEE support, and Mike Williams made a very interesting historical speech. And at these events, John Gustafson was awarded with diploma and plaque for the duplicate of IBC, and Karl Chang was awarded with Marin Drinov Medal. This is the highest medal for science from Bulgarian Academy of Science. So, John, Karl, congratulations once more. It was very, very nice cocktails and other celebrations and meetings. So, thank you very much for this not very short presentation.
Thank you very much, Kiril. That's okay. It is all very informative and very relevant. Thank you. What else shall we say about the importance of Richard K. Richards' book? Well, it is related to the federal court case Honeywell versus Sperry Rand. And Charles Cole, who was one of the attorneys involved in this case, is here on stage. And he was just telling me earlier about the importance of this book. Charles, could you tell us a little bit more, please?
Thank you. Beginning in 1966, I did a 5-year-long investigation into the origins of electronic digital computing. In the course of that investigation, we discovered Atanasoff through the R.K. Richards book. And then through a process of talking to people, getting documents that they had, identifying other people and getting more documents, we put together a collection of testimony and exhibits that was presented to Judge Larson. In 1973, he came down with his decision and had concluded that the invention being claimed in the ENIAC patent was not invented by Eckert and Mauchly, but had been in fact derived from Dr. Atanasoff and Clifford Berry. This led to the invalidation of the patent, and it meant that Sperry Rand could no longer dictate the terms upon which competition would be permitted in the data processing industry. The impact of that decision at the time was far-reaching. So it was gratifying to get a chance to work on that. I learned a lot about what trials were like, and because I'd never done one before until we did that one, and it was 10 months long.
Thank you, Charlie. That's actually a slide that mentions the federal court historic decision, which was already included in John Gustafson's keynote, and Charles Cole also spoke about this. So basically, the electronic digital computer was derived from John Atanasoff's invention. And the next speaker who is online, Gordon Bell. And Gordon Bell, who couldn't make it, who couldn't come here, but he was telling me and others his own story about how he discovered JVA's invention. So I have put a few bullets from emails with Gordon, and Gordon, please go ahead and tell us more.
Yeah, just I want to say a couple of words. You know, my introduction to John Atanasoff at the first digital computing museum we had in Marlborough was attended by a couple of hundred engineers. And from the moment John started talking, we were all enthralled with what he had to say. And in particular, I think anyone, let me encourage everyone in the audience here in Mountain View, California. But really held the audience there. And that's where famous trip from Ames to to Illinois and the Roadhouse. So he clearly talked about the Roadhouse, but maybe it got embellished. I don't think he recalled using a napkin or anything like that. But anyway, the video speaks to that, and that's, I think, one of our most prized videos. Equally, or maybe above, the only video of Bob Noyes discussing the integrated circuit. But please look there. And then I think I have one other comment about what engineers should do, or what engineers in science should do. And that John was really tremendous about recording everything and keeping everything. And I spent a few years with the idea that where you never throw anything away, particularly in any of the bits that you have. And that turned out to be maybe a part or influential a little bit. It really stuck in my mind that when Mockley had returned to Philadelphia after his road trip to Ames, he was just riding around and ended up in Ames. He had forgotten that he had taken this little 3-day trip with his children to visit the Atanasoffs and look at this machine. But anyway, he had forgotten his umbrella. And so he wrote back to Mockley and said, where's my damn, can you send me my umbrella? And that turned out to be part of the trial. At least that's the way I hear. I hope John will verify, or John Gustafson will verify that. But anyway, that was another thing that good advice for engineers, because for one thing, it may have helped invalidate the patent, but it also said something about the person. And that's the other reason you want to visit want to look at the Atanasov video from November 1980, and you can get that at the Computer History Museum. Yeah. But it really spoke to my sort of lifelong admiration, and I'll say friendship with both the John and John number 2 and many of the Atanasov family that I met in Ames. So anyway.
Thank you, Gordon. Yes, there is a number of archive materials, videos available from the Computer History Museum repository. So it's very easy to find them. Some of them are on YouTube, but the originals are kept. Sorry.
Oh, excuse me. The other thing that's there is John Gustafson's reconstruction of the ABC, and so that's the reason you probably have to visit it. But anyway, so it's I'll say probably our most important artifact that we have in the museum.
Thank you, Gordon. I think it's probably on the next slide. It's here. So yes, the ABC reconstruction as completed by John Gustafson has been in the Computer History Museum in Mountain View, with a lot of support coming from Gordon, Bell, and a number of others. It's a very complex logistics operation, but it was successfully moved to Mountain View. And the video demonstrating the operation of the ABC is also available from the Computer History
Right.
Museum archives. So here we are. Every decade, new developments, new computer architectures, very exciting history of computing since the invention. We can call them the 5 waves of electronic digital computers: mainframes, personal, internet, mobile, Internet of Things. I would like to ask now Chang, who was a chair of computer science in Iowa State at 2003 and organized the first symposium on modern computing, JVA Symposium. And here is a photo taken. So Carl, please tell us about it.
Thank you, Lamir. I was asked to give a little bit history about the so-called JVA initiative. I joined Iowa State back in 2002 as a department chair of computer science. And then several months later, I got a letter, actually a forwarded letter from President Greg Joffrey of Iowa State at the time. And he asked me that, here's an invitation from the Bulgarian government, and invited him to Sofia, Bulgaria, to help celebrate the 100th anniversary of JVA. And he said, I'm a chemist. No, you are a computer scientist. No, you should go. So feel very obligated. I begin to study JVA. Before that, no, I have no idea about the legacy, ABC, and JVA. And then after I studied a little bit more, I also heavily involved in IEEE at the time. So I proposed 2 things. First, I would like to see if we can have a JVA initiative committee formed. So people like Professor Boyanov sitting here remotely, and Professor Gatov, myself, already retired, of course, John Gustafson here. That is more than about 20 years ago. And then I also proposed to have this first JVA Symposium. This is an ISU Symposium. By the way, we have about 600 people attended, and many ISU faculty and students. It's not IEEE, so you cannot really find much archive out of this symposium. And then for the JVA Initiative Committee, I think the mission is very simple, just to promote this ABC legacy and JVA legacy. So after that, I proposed to the IEEE Foundation. Actually, we brought the president of IEEE Foundation, Dick Gowen. Dick Gowen is yet another ISU graduate. To Sofia, we talked to the president, Pavanov of Bulgaria, also the National Academy president, and so on. And Dick Gowen is very supportive, and we actually tried to establish the IEEE medal in honor of John Atanasov. Then in 2006, I proposed that we should really have an IEEE JVA Symposium on modern computing. So we had that symposium in 2006 in Sofia. So a job is not done yet. We still have lots of other initiatives. Besides, we're still working on establishing the IEEE medal in honor of John Atanasov. Yes, we also had ComSec in one of the roundtable panel back in 2009. And I would like to take this opportunity to particularly thank Dr. Hridesh Rajan. He's sitting right behind there, the current department chair of computer science, that the JVA family actually established an endowment at Iowa State for the JVA initiative. And under Rajan's leadership, he is currently administer this fund, and that is the reason why we can be here today. Thank you for your support. So I think that is all. I think we still have a lot of work to do, and we probably were in the second stage of the JVA initiative.
Thank you, Carl. Oops. What we can say about the road to the digital future? Well, it looks difficult to say that JVA knew what was going to happen when he invented electronic digital computing. But what was happening was a true revolution in human history. How about the fifth information revolution? Has it already happened? Most likely, yes. That's the web and the internet of everything. That's another clear revolution. How about another one? Perhaps we can discuss whether AI deserves to be in the history as information revolution number 6. It's a question mark, but it's interesting. It's under discussion. It's exciting. So maybe. So discussion topics. I haven't been following the time. I think we are 15 minutes actually behind over time, but some discussion points include I don't know what we should say. I think we should mention something. I like the last question. When and in what circumstances the name Atanasov Berry Computer ABC was first used, and how many ABC machines have been built so far? Any answers to that one? Well, we keep talking about ABC like something that was happening since 739, but that's not the case. Of course, Clifford Berry was highly instrumental part of the project. But in fact, John Atanasov started using ABC in his testimonial papers because Clifford Berry had just passed away a few years ago. So he wanted to pay tribute to his graduate assistant and started writing in the paper ABC. The other thing is how many? Well, it is actually 4. The first partial prototype, which was operational in 1939, while this first partial prototype was operational, Clifford Berry started building the frame of the full-size machine. And he was, when talking to Richard K. Richards, he was saying, at that time I had just started, I didn't know what JVA wants to put in the frame. But then, of course, they built the full-size machine. And then for the court case, I was checking also with Charles Cole. There is a photo of JVA and also with John Gustafson. With another partial prototype, he was asked to demonstrate that the machine, that the invention actually works. So he rebuilt it again in late 60s. And of course, John Gustafson and his team rebuilt again full-size reconstruction. So 4 of them. So
there are also software simulators out there.
Here we go.
Yeah, there are software simulators. I don't know if they're easy to find on the web, but people have built complete bit-perfect simulators where you can see all the bits in the machine on the screen at the same time. What they do is it solves a problem. Pretty cool.
It looks like we are close to finishing this session. I apologize for the delay. I think we are nearly 20 minutes late. It is the lunch break coming next. So thank you very much again. Thank you to all the panel members. both on stage and online. Thank you all, and we shall keep in touch and see you soon. Thank you.
Bye all.
Bye.